The spaceship Asterisk Pioneer Horizon Asterisk floated silently in the vast emptiness of space, its sleek metallic surface reflecting the faint light of distant stars. Inside, Captain Laura Hayes sat in the command chair, her eyes fixed on the main screen as it displayed a swirling mass of data. The ship had been traveling for months, exploring uncharted regions of the solar system when something unusual happened. A transmission came through, clear, deliberate, and unlike anything they had ever encountered before. Laura leaned forward, her fingers brushing against the edge of the console. "Play it again," she said, her voice calm but curious. The crew gathered around as the message replayed. It wasn't in any human language, but the tone was unmistakable, an invitation. Through hours of analysis, the linguist on board, Ethan Blake, managed to decode parts of it. The message was from an alien species called the Valith, and they wanted the humans to join them for dinner aboard their orbital station near Saturn's rings. The room fell silent. Dinner? With aliens? It sounded absurd, almost comical, but no one laughed. Laura glanced at her second-in-command, Daniel Carter, who stood nearby with his arms crossed. His expression was unreadable, though Laura knew he was thinking the same thing she was. This could be a trap. Still, it was also an opportunity. A chance to make contact with an advanced civilization and perhaps learn something valuable. "I don't like it," Rachel Meyer, the ship's biologist, finally spoke up. Her curly brown hair framed her face as she shook her head. "We don't know anything about these aliens. What if this dinner is just a setup?" Engineer Noah Green, a lanky man with a knack for sarcasm, chimed in. "Yeah, because nothing says peaceful first contact like inviting strangers over for food. Maybe we'll get lucky and they'll serve space lasagna." Laura ignored the joke, though a small smile tugged at the corner of her lips. She turned back to the screen, her mind racing. If they refused the invitation, they might miss a once-in-a-lifetime chance to build a relationship with the Valith. But if they accepted, well, there were risks. No one knew what kind of beings the Valith were or what their intentions might be. For all they knew, the aliens could see humans as little more than lab rats, or worse. "We're going," Laura announced after a moment. Her decision startled some of the crew, but no one argued. They trusted her judgment. "But we go prepared. We take only a small team. Me, Daniel, Rachel, Ethan, and Noah. Everyone else stays here and keeps the ship ready in case we need to leave quickly." As the days passed, the crew worked tirelessly to prepare for the mission. Ethan spent hours refining translations of the Valith message, hoping to glean more clues about their hosts. Rachel ran simulations on how human bodies might react to unknown substances, while Noah double-checked every piece of equipment they planned to bring. Daniel kept a close eye on everyone, making sure tensions didn't boil over. Despite their efforts, unease lingered in the air like static electricity. Finally, the day arrived. The Asterisk Pioneer Horizon Asterisk approached the coordinates provided in the transmission. On the view screen, the Valith orbital station loomed into view, a massive structure that seemed to pulse with energy. Its surface shimmered with colors that shifted and danced, as if alive. Laura felt a shiver run down her spine. This was it, the moment of truth. "Ready?" she asked, glancing at her team. One by one, they nodded. Rachel adjusted the strap of her bag, which held medical supplies and sampling tools. Ethan clutched his tablet tightly, his knuckles white. Even Noah looked unusually serious, his usual humor replaced by quiet determination. Laura took a deep breath. "Let's do this." With that, the small group stepped onto the shuttle that would carry them to the station, leaving the safety of their ship behind. As they drew closer, the reality of what they were about to do sank in. They were walking into the unknown, guided only by hope and a fragile thread of trust. Whatever awaited them on the other side, one thing was certain: they were about to find out if humanity was truly ready to sit at the galactic table. The shuttle docked with a soft hiss, and the humans stepped out into an alien world unlike anything they had ever seen. The air inside the station was thick and cool, carrying a faint metallic scent that made Rachel wrinkle her nose. Above them, the ceiling glowed with shifting patterns of light, as if the station itself were alive. Strange plants lined the walls, their leaves pulsing softly in hues of green and blue. The floor beneath their feet felt spongy, like walking on moss, though it supported their weight without issue. A group of Valith approached, their towering forms casting long shadows across the room. They were unlike any beings the humans had imagined, translucent, shimmering bodies that seemed to ripple with every movement. Their faces, if they could be called that, were smooth and featureless except for glowing lines that traced intricate patterns across their heads. Laura felt a chill run down her spine as she realized the aliens didn't have eyes, or at least, not in the way humans understood them. Yet somehow, she could feel their attention focused on her team. One of the Valith moved forward, its body rippling like liquid crystal. It stopped a few feet away and emitted a series of soft, melodic tones. Ethan quickly consulted his tablet, which translated the sounds into English. "Greetings," the device displayed. "We are honored by your presence." Laura cleared her throat and spoke carefully, knowing every word mattered. "Thank you for inviting us. We're curious to learn more about your culture." She gestured toward her team, introducing each member by name. The Valith tilted their heads slightly, as if considering the gesture. The lead alien introduced itself as Kiel, its voice synthesized through the translator. "Follow," it said simply, turning to guide them deeper into the station. The humans exchanged nervous glances but obeyed, following closely behind. As they walked, the hallway seemed to stretch endlessly, curving gently like the inside of a giant shell. The walls hummed faintly, and the bioluminescent plants cast an eerie glow over everything. Rachel couldn't help but reach out to touch one of the plants, only to yank her hand back when it let out a low musical note. Noah smirked. "Careful," he whispered. "You might end up playing dinner music." Despite the tension, Laura appreciated his attempt to lighten the mood. She gave him a small smile before refocusing on their surroundings. Something about this place felt both beautiful and unsettling, like standing on the edge of a dream. Finally, they arrived at a massive doorway that slid open with a whisper. Beyond it lay a grand hall unlike anything they'd seen so far. A long table stretched across the room, set with dishes that looked more like sculptures than food. Each plate glowed faintly, emitting colors that shifted and danced. Some dishes floated slightly above the surface, suspended by unseen forces. The smell was strange, not unpleasant, but unfamiliar, like a mix of spices and minerals. Shield gestured for them to sit, and the humans hesitated for a moment before taking their places. Laura noticed how the chairs molded themselves to their bodies, almost too perfectly, as if reading their shapes. Daniel leaned closer to her and murmured, "This feels like being swallowed whole." Laura nodded, keeping her expression neutral. "Stay sharp," she whispered back. Sile stood at the head of the table, its body shimmering brighter as it began to speak. "This meal is a gift," the translator displayed. "A sharing of our essence. Be mindful. It may challenge you." Ethan frowned, typing furiously on his tablet. "Challenge us? What does that mean?" he muttered under his breath. Rachel studied the dishes in front of her, her scientist's mind already working. "It's probably some kind of test," she said quietly. "They're seeing how we react to their food." Noah leaned back in his chair, trying to look relaxed despite the knot forming in his stomach. "Well, if they wanted to kill us, they could have done it already. Let's just hope they're good cooks." Laura shot him a warning glance but didn't argue. She knew he was right. They were completely at the mercy of their hosts. Still, there was no turning back now. Whatever this meal was meant to be, they would face it together. Sile raised one of its shimmering appendages, signaling the start of the feast. The first dish, a gelatinous orb glowing faintly green, was placed in front of each human. Laura took a deep breath, picked up her fork, and prepared to take the first bite. Laura hesitated for only a moment before plunging her fork into the glowing green orb. The surface gave way with a soft pop, releasing a faint aroma that reminded her of citrus and something metallic. She glanced at Ciel, who seemed to be watching, or perhaps sensing, her every move. Taking a deep breath, she lifted the fork to her mouth and took a small bite. The flavor hit her tongue like an electric shock. It was sweet, almost overwhelmingly so, but with an undertone of sharpness that made her lips tingle. For a brief second, she thought she might gag, but then the sensation mellowed into something strangely pleasant. Noah, sitting across from her, raised an eyebrow. "Well?" he asked, his voice low. "It's intense," Laura admitted, swallowing carefully. "But not bad." Encouraged by her reaction, the rest of the team cautiously tried the dish. Rachel chewed thoughtfully, her brow furrowed as if analyzing every molecule. Daniel ate slowly, his eyes darting around the room as if expecting something to happen. Ethan hesitated the longest, his scientific mind racing with questions, but eventually he too took a bite. Noah, ever the skeptic, popped the entire orb into his mouth at once. His eyes widened immediately. "Whoa," he said, his voice muffled. "That's like eating a lightning bolt dipped in candy." The others chuckled nervously, though the tension in the room remained thick. As the first course was cleared away, the Valith brought out the next dish, a shimmering blue liquid served in delicate glass-like containers. This time, Ethan spoke up before anyone could dig in. "Ciel," he said, his tone polite but firm, "can you tell us what this is? Or maybe explain its purpose?" The alien paused, its body rippling slightly as it processed the question. After a moment, the translator displayed a response. "This is a reflection of our inner balance. It will awaken your senses." "Awaken them how?" Rachel asked, her voice tight with suspicion. "Will it hurt?" Ciel tilted its head, as if considering the question. "It challenges. It does not harm." That wasn't exactly reassuring, but they had little choice but to proceed. Laura sipped the liquid first, her face betraying no emotion even as warmth spread through her chest. The sensation wasn't painful, but it was overwhelming, like being doused in icy water followed by a rush of heat. Colors around her seemed brighter, sounds sharper. She blinked rapidly, trying to adjust. Daniel wasn't as composed. As soon as he drank the liquid, his skin flushed red, and he gripped the edge of the table tightly. "What the?" he began, but his words trailed off as he struggled to focus. Rachel quickly checked his vitals using a handheld scanner, her fingers flying over the device. "His heart rate is elevated, but he's stable," she reported, though her voice betrayed her concern. Noah, meanwhile, grinned despite the chaos. "Man, this stuff is wild," he said, waving his hands in front of his face as if testing his newfound clarity. "I feel like I could see through walls." Ethan frowned, jotting notes on his tablet. "It's some kind of stimulant," he muttered, "but unlike anything we've encountered before." The third course arrived, a plate of tiny, glowing cubes that pulsed faintly as if alive. Rachel picked one up gingerly, examining it closely. "It's warm," she said, turning it over in her fingers. "And it feels alive." Before anyone could stop him, Noah popped one into his mouth. For a moment, nothing happened. Then his eyes went wide, and he froze mid-chew. Guys," he said, his voice trembling. "I think my tongue just fell asleep." Sure enough, his speech began to slur slightly, and his movements became sluggish. Laura leaned forward, alarmed. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Noel slurred, though his drooping eyelids suggested otherwise. Within moments, the effect wore off, leaving him blinking in confusion. "Okay, that was weird," he admitted, rubbing his temples. Rachel turned to Ciel, her frustration bubbling over. "You said this wouldn't harm us," she accused, her voice rising. "What's happening to us?" Ciel's body shimmered brighter, almost apologetically. "We test limits," the translator displayed. To understand, not to harm. Laura clenched her fists under the table, forcing herself to stay calm. She realized now what this dinner truly was, an experiment disguised as hospitality. The Valith weren't just feeding them. They were studying their reactions, pushing their boundaries to see how far humans could go. And yet there was no anger in Trail's tone, only curiosity. "We need to be smarter about this," Laura whispered to her team. "Play along, but stay alert. We're not just guests here, we're subjects." The others nodded, their expressions grim. They had walked into the unknown, and now they were paying the price. But as the next dish was placed before them, glowing faintly purple, Laura knew one thing for certain. The night was far from over. The fourth course arrived, a cluster of small purple pods stacked neatly on the plate. Each pod seemed to pulse faintly, as though it had a heartbeat of its own. Laura stared at them, her mind racing. The earlier dishes had already pushed their limits, and she couldn't shake the feeling that this one would be even more intense. She glanced at her team. Rachel looked uneasy. Daniel was pale but determined. Noah still wore a forced grin, and Ethan scribbled furiously on his tablet, trying to make sense of everything. Before anyone could touch the food, Ethan leaned forward and addressed Seal. His voice was calm but firm. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "You said this meal is about sharing, but it feels like testing. Are you studying us?" Style's body shimmered in response, the glowing lines on its surface shifting into new patterns. The translator displayed its answer. "We seek understanding. Your kind is young but curious. We wish to know how you adapt." Ethan nodded slowly, jotting down the response. "Adapt to what exactly? To your food, or to situations you create?" Laura watched the exchange carefully, impressed by Ethan's boldness. She decided to step in. "If you're testing us," she said, keeping her tone measured, "then tell us why. What do you hope to learn?" Shield tilted its head, as if considering the question. "Survival requires adaptation. We test to see how far your kind can go." Rachel frowned, her hands gripping the edge of the table. "But survival doesn't have to mean suffering," she said. "There are other ways to learn about us." Shield didn't respond immediately. Instead, it gestured toward the purple pods. "This dish reflects resilience. Try it." Noah groaned softly under his breath. "Great, another mystery meal," he muttered, though he reached for a pod anyway. "Here goes nothing." He bit into it cautiously, and immediately his face twisted in surprise. "It's cold," he said, shivering slightly. "Like ice, but not water. And it tastes metallic." The others hesitated, but Laura picked up a pod and examined it closely. It felt smooth and cool to the touch, almost slippery. She took a small bite, letting the flavor settle on her tongue. At first it was mild, almost tasteless, but then a sharp, icy sensation spread through her mouth, followed by a strange tingling that traveled down her throat. Her vision blurred for a moment, and she blinked rapidly, trying to focus. Daniel tried next, chewing slowly. His expression remained neutral, but beads of sweat formed on his forehead. "It's like my whole body just froze for a second," he admitted. Rachel, ever the cautious one, used her scanner to analyze the pod before eating it. "It's some kind of compound I've never seen before," she whispered. "It's interacting with our nervous system. That's why we feel these effects." Ethan listened intently, nodding. "They're not just feeding us. They're mapping our biological responses," he said. "Every bite gives them data about how our bodies work." Laura's jaw tightened. She realized now that the Valith weren't being cruel or malicious. They simply viewed humans as subjects of study, but that didn't make it any less unsettling. Still, she saw an opportunity. If the aliens valued knowledge, perhaps the humans could use that to their advantage. "Kyle," she said, leaning forward slightly, "we appreciate your curiosity about us. But we're curious about you too. Tell us about your dishes, how you prepare them, what they mean to your culture. The alien paused, its body shimmering brighter. Our meals are sacred, it responded. They carry stories, lessons, and history. Then teach us, Laura pressed gently. Share your recipes with us. Let us understand your traditions. For a moment, Kyle didn't move. Then, slowly, its body rippled again, and the translator displayed a single word. Interesting. Noah raised an eyebrow. Did we just get points for asking nicely? Laura ignored him, focusing instead on the subtle change in Chiel's demeanor. For the first time, the alien seemed intrigued rather than merely analytical. Perhaps they had found a way to shift the dynamic of the evening, from being tested to becoming partners in discovery. As the fifth course was brought out, a steaming platter that emitted faint sparks, Laura felt a flicker of hope. They were still navigating uncharted territory, but maybe, just maybe, they could turn this dinner into something more than a test. The fifth course sat on the table, a steaming platter that seemed to hum with energy. Tiny sparks danced across its surface, vanishing into thin air like fireflies. The humans stared at it, unsure whether to be amazed or alarmed. Laura leaned forward slightly, her eyes fixed on Xiel. This one looks intense, she said carefully. Can you tell us more about it? Xiel's translucent body shimmered as it responded. This dish represents connection, the translator displayed. It shares our essence. Connection, Ethan repeated, his voice tinged with skepticism. What does that mean for us? Will it affect us differently than the others? Xiel tilted its head, the glowing lines on its surface shifting into new patterns. It will bind you temporarily to our perception. You will see as we see. Rachel frowned, gripping her scanner tightly. Bind us how? She asked. Is it safe? It is not harmful, Kyle replied. But it may overwhelm. Noah groaned softly. Of course it will, he muttered under his breath. Because why wouldn't it? Laura shot him a quick glance before turning back to Xiel. If this dish connects us to your way of seeing, can you explain what we might experience? It would help us prepare. Xiel shimmered again, its body rippling as if considering the question. You will feel unity, it said finally. With us, with all things. But only briefly. The humans exchanged uneasy glances. Unity sounded poetic, but they had learned by now that the Vailith's words often carried hidden meanings. Still, there was no refusing the dish without risking offense. Laura nodded slowly. We understand. Thank you for explaining. As the platter was placed in front of them, Laura took a deep breath and reached for a small piece. The moment it touched her tongue, warmth spread through her body, followed by an overwhelming sensation of clarity. Colors around her became impossibly vivid, sounds resonated deeply, and she felt as though she could sense the presence of everyone in the room. Not just their physical forms, but something deeper, almost like emotions. Daniel gasped, clutching the edge of the table. I can feel everything, he whispered, his voice trembling. It's too much. Rachel closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the flood of sensations. She could hear the faint hum of the station's walls, feel the pulse of the strange plants nearby, and even sense the quiet rhythm of Xiel's shimmering body. Noah, meanwhile, sat perfectly still, his usual sarcasm replaced by awe. Wow, he murmured. This is incredible. Ethan scribbled furiously on his tablet, trying to capture every detail of the experience. Though the sensations were disorienting, he forced himself to stay focused. They're letting us see the world through their eyes, he said, his voice filled with wonder. It's not just about sight. It's about connection. Laura felt tears welling up in her eyes as she realized the depth of what the Vailith were sharing. For a brief moment, she wasn't just human. She was part of something larger, something vast and interconnected. She glanced at Xiel, who seemed to glow brighter, almost approvingly. When the effects finally faded, leaving the humans blinking and breathless, Laura knew they had been given a gift, a glimpse into the Vailith's perspective. She turned to Xil, her voice steadied despite the lingering dizziness. "Thank you," she said sincerely. "That was profound." Kyle's body rippled softly, and the translator displayed a response. "You are adaptable. This pleases us." Encouraged by the alien's reaction, Laura pressed further. "If you're willing to share such experiences, perhaps you'd also be open to teaching us more about your food, your culture, how you create these dishes." Sheil paused, its body shimmering thoughtfully. Then it tilted its head slightly. "You wish to learn?" "Yes," Laura replied firmly. "We want to understand, to grow. Isn't that why you invited us here?" For a long moment, Scheidel didn't respond. Then, slowly, it gestured toward the next course. "Very well," the translator displayed. "We will teach." The humans exchanged hopeful glances. They had started the evening as guests and subjects, but now they were becoming something more, students. As the sixth course was brought out, glowing faintly orange, Laura felt a renewed sense of purpose. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, armed with curiosity and determination. The sixth course arrived, a glowing orange sphere suspended in midair, rotating slowly as if held by an invisible force. The humans stared at it, their earlier awe tempered by caution. Laura leaned forward slightly, her voice calm but curious. "Kyle," she began, "this dish looks different from the others. Can you tell us about it?" Kyle's body shimmered as it responded. "This is the peak of our craft," the translator displayed. "It carries illumination." "Illumination," Ethan repeated, his brow furrowing. "What does that mean for us? Will it affect our minds again?" "It will heighten your senses," Kyle explained, "but only temporarily. It is a gift, not a test." Rachel frowned, her fingers tightening around her scanner. "Heightened senses could still be dangerous," she said quietly. "We don't know how our bodies will react." Noah smirked, though there was a flicker of nervousness in his eyes. "Well, if it makes me see rainbows or hear space whales, I'll let you know." Laura ignored the joke, focusing instead on Xiao. "If this dish is special, can you teach us how it's made? That way, we can learn and appreciate it more fully." Xiao tilted its head, its glowing lines shifting into new patterns. "You wish to understand creation?" "Yes," Laura replied firmly. "We want to know your methods, your ingredients, everything that makes this dish unique." For a moment, Scheidel didn't respond. Then it gestured toward the floating sphere. "Observe carefully." The Valeth reached out with one of its shimmering appendages, touching the sphere lightly. Instantly, the orb split open, releasing a cascade of golden sparks that floated gently toward the humans. Each spark carried a faint scent, like honey mixed with something unidentifiable, and left a warm, tingling sensation wherever it touched their skin. Daniel flinched as a spark landed on his hand, but the sensation wasn't painful. Instead, it felt like a rush of energy spreading through his body. Rachel quickly scanned the sparks with her device, her eyes widening as she analyzed the data. "These are some kind of energy particles," she whispered. "They're interacting with our cells, boosting our perception." Ethan scribbled notes furiously, his mind racing to process what he was seeing. "This isn't just cooking, it's advanced biochemistry," he muttered. "They're using technology and biology together." Laura watched the display with quiet admiration. She realized now that the Valeth weren't just sharing food. They were sharing knowledge, layer by layer. By asking questions and showing genuine interest, they had earned the aliens' respect. When the effects of the sparks began to fade, leaving the humans feeling alert but calm, Laura turned back to Xiel. "Thank you," she said sincerely. "This has been extraordinary. But we'd like to learn more. Could you explain the process behind this dish?" Xiel shimmered softly, as if pleased by the request. "Very well," it responded. "We will share steps. Listen closely." Over the next few minutes, Xiel described the preparation of the dish in careful detail, using terms that Ethan translated and simplified for the team. The humans listened intently, absorbing every word. Rachel jotted down key points, while Noah tried to visualize the steps in his mind. Even Daniel, who had been skeptical at first, seemed captivated by the complexity of the process. As the explanation drew to a close, Laura felt a deep sense of gratitude. They had come to this dinner as strangers, unsure of what awaited them. But through curiosity, patience, and mutual respect, they had forged a fragile connection with the Valeth. The final course was brought out, a glowing orb that hovered silently above the table. Jael gestured toward it. "This is farewell," it said, a reminder of unity. Laura nodded, understanding the significance of the moment. Whatever happened next, they had achieved something remarkable. A bridge between two species, built not through fear or force, but through shared experiences and a hunger for knowledge. The final course hovered above the table, a glowing orb that seemed to pulse with a quiet rhythm. The humans stared at it, their minds still reeling from everything they had experienced during the meal. Laura took a deep breath, steadying herself before addressing Xael. "This is the last dish, isn't it?" she asked softly. Xael's body shimmered in response. "It is farewell," the translator displayed, "a taste of unity before parting." Laura nodded, her expression thoughtful. "We've learned so much tonight. Thank you for sharing your traditions and your knowledge with us." The alien tilted its head slightly, as if acknowledging her gratitude. Then it gestured for them to proceed. With some hesitation, Laura reached out and touched the orb. It felt warm and smooth, almost like holding a piece of sunlight. When she broke off a small piece and placed it in her mouth, a wave of calm washed over her. The flavor was subtle, like nothing she could describe, but it left her feeling grounded, connected not just to the Valeth, but to something larger, something infinite. Daniel followed suit, chewing slowly as the sensation spread through him. His earlier tension melted away, replaced by a sense of peace. Rachel closed her eyes, letting the experience settle over her, while Noah grinned widely. "Okay, this one's my favorite," he said, his voice lighter than it had been all night. No tingling tongues or freezing brains. Just good vibes. Ethan scribbled furiously on his tablet, trying to capture every detail of the moment. Though the effects were mild compared to earlier courses, he recognized the significance of what they were experiencing. This wasn't just food. It was a gesture of goodwill, a way of saying goodbye without words. When the orb was finally consumed, Shael spoke again. "You are resilient," the translator displayed. "You adapt. We will remember this." Laura smiled faintly, though her heart still carried traces of unease. "Thank you for trusting us enough to share this meal. We'll take what we've learned back to our people." Shael's body rippled softly, almost like a nod. "Perhaps we will meet again." With that, the Valeth guided the humans back to the entrance of the station. As they walked through the glowing hallways, the team exchanged quiet reflections. Rachel clutched her notes tightly, already thinking about how they could replicate some of the dishes safely. Ethan muttered to himself, piecing together theories about the Valeth's technology. Even Noah, who usually joked to lighten the mood, stayed unusually quiet, lost in thought. When they stepped back onto the shuttle, Laura turned for one last look at the station. Its shimmering surface seemed to pulse gently, as if bidding them farewell. She felt a strange mix of emotions, relief at leaving, gratitude for the experience, and a lingering curiosity about what else lay beyond the stars. Back aboard the Pioneer Horizon *, the crew gathered in the main cabin to debrief. Laura stood at the front, her voice steady but thoughtful. "Tonight wasn't just a dinner," she began. "It was a test, a lesson, and maybe even a beginning. The Valeth see us as curious and adaptable. That's something we should be proud of." Rachel nodded, flipping through her notes. "Their food is incredible, but it's also dangerous if we don't understand it. I'll start analyzing everything we brought back, but we need to be careful moving forward." Daniel crossed his arms, his expression serious. They're advanced, no doubt about it. But they're also cautious. If we want to build trust, we have to show them we're willing to learn, not just take. Ethan leaned back in his chair, tapping his pen against his notebook. This could change everything. If we can figure out their methods, we might unlock new ways of thinking about science, medicine, even survival. Noah smirked, breaking the tension. Yeah, and maybe next time, we'll bring dessert. Despite the joke, the room remained quiet for a moment, each person reflecting on what they had witnessed. Laura looked around at her team, pride swelling in her chest. They had faced the unknown together, pushed through fear and uncertainty, and come out stronger for it. As the ship turned away from the orbital station and set course for Earth, Laura gazed out at the stars. The universe was vast and full of mysteries, but tonight had proven one thing. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't in weapons or shields. It was in curiosity, resilience, and the willingness to reach out, even when the path ahead was uncertain. And somewhere out there, orbiting Saturn's rings, the Valith watched the humans depart, their shimmering forms rippling softly. Perhaps they too felt a spark of hope, a belief that two very different species could find common ground, one meal at a time.